Hello, everyone, and welcome to what is essentially the beginning of your fellowship journey. For those that don't know me, my name is Paul West, and I'm an ABC broadcaster and author. And I used to be the host of a program called River Cottage Australia, where I explored the intersection of food, culture, and environment, and lived on a little farm on the far south coast of New South Wales, near Central Tilba, with my border collie, Digger, and my family. I'm now in Bermagui, and I'm very inspired to be here to help bring the work of the Winston Churchill Trust to the potential candidates to apply for their journey. I'm pleased to host this information session on behalf of the Churchill Trust. And firstly, in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people today. So what's it all about? What is a Churchill Fellowship? Well, great question, and that's why you're all here today. A Churchill Fellowship is an opportunity to travel overseas for 4 to 8 weeks to explore a topic or issue that you're passionate about. The Winston Churchill Memorial Trust was formed in 1965 with the principal objective of perpetuating and honouring Sir Winston Churchill's memory by the awarding of Churchill Fellowships. You don't need to have an academic qualification to apply. In fact, you don't even need to have finished school. And you can do a Churchill Fellowship on any topic, provided that there is a benefit to Australia and your community by you bringing back your knowledge or skills and sharing it. Because we have so much opportunity here in Australia, and this session in particular focuses on food production. And anyone that's here will already know that we produce some of the best food on the planet. We have an incredible diversity of climates, and we live in this bountiful continent with incredible oceans and seafood life. We've got amazing agriculture. So to be able to go and visit other food production cultures around the world, bring back some of that knowledge and wisdom and culture, and to add it to the dynamic and multifaceted nature of Australian food production culture is an incredible opportunity. So to apply, applicants are required to complete and submit an application from the 1st of March to the 1st of May. Applicants may then be shortlisted for an interview. Those that have been awarded and completed a Churchill Fellowship are called Fellows. Now, a little bit of housekeeping for tonight's information session. The topic will be focusing specifically on food manufacturing topics. However, fellowship topics are incredibly diverse and broad. So it's okay if your topic doesn't quite fit under this umbrella or anything like the speakers that we'll be hearing from tonight. You'll be able to submit questions via the Q&A function for our speakers here, as well as any questions about the application process and the fellowship generally, which we will go over. If you miss your chance or think of more questions after this session is finished, you can contact the Churchill Trust directly via the Churchill Trust website at churchillfellowship.com.au. Also, be sure to check out the FAQ on their website, as your questions may be already answered there. Now, we're aiming to wrap up this session in just over an hour. So as much as I love the sound of my own voice and I could talk all night, it's time to jump right in. First up, to get the ball rolling and to give you an idea of an overview of the Trust and the Fellowships, I'd like to introduce Chief Executive Officer of the Winston Churchill Trust, Adam Davey.
Thank you, Paul, for your great introduction. You've done a fabulous job describing Churchill Fellowships, and I'm going to give you all a slightly more detailed overview of fellowships, a bit about the history, and I'll talk a bit about what we're looking for when it comes to your application and assessment. So firstly, a little bit of history. So when Sir Winston Churchill resigned as British Prime Minister in 1955 at the age of 80, he had served under 5 reigning monarchs, and he'd survived 3 wars. He'd been a writer, an historian, a journalist, an adventurer, and a painter. He'd even won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1953. So as you can imagine, there was a widespread desire to honour Sir Winston Churchill and capture the essence of his public service, his inspiration, his intellect, and even his humour for generations to come. And of course, like many people in history, Sir Winston wasn't perfect. And we do acknowledge that. And we've got some really interesting and insightful essays we've commissioned on our website that explore Churchill through a contemporary lens. So I'd recommend that you read them and read, there's a lot to read about Winston Churchill, so you won't be short of reading material if you want to find out more about him. But he did believe that anything was possible if you put your mind to it, and that the greatest figures in history are those who made a contribution to public service and to their fellow countrymen. And when Prime Minister at the time, Sir Robert Menzies, announced the news of Sir Winston's death to the Australian community in January 1965, he simultaneously announced a national fundraising event that would establish the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust, who would administer Churchill Fellowships. So on Churchill Memorial Sunday, 28th of February 1965, a door-to-door appeal was launched, and over 220,000 Australians participated with support from our Return Services League. And believe it or not, around $4 million, so about £2.2 million, was raised, and it remains one of Australia's largest one-day fundraising efforts in history. In fact, it was the only time that banks opened on a Sunday to receive all the funds. That gives you a sense of the scale of the event and the support of the Australian people for the creation of Churchill Fellowships. So if you have a passion for a subject you wish to investigate overseas, and you know what you're striving to achieve, and you desire to make a difference in your industry or community in Australia, then a Churchill Fellowship could be for you. So Churchill Fellows are the types of people who are passionate and committed to an issue. They want to learn and share their knowledge so that others in their community might also benefit. We find that the people who apply for a Churchill Fellowship tend to be people who are passionate about making a positive impact in their community. So that's a bit of a hint there for you. In terms of the Churchill Fellowships themselves, a Churchill Fellowship really is a unique and prestigious opportunity that's available to Australians from all walks of life. As Paul said, it's not an academic scholarship. You don't need to have finished school. It's not a funding grant. And it's important to note that it's more than just a study abroad program. It's an opportunity to become an expert in your field and to make a real impact in our world. That's not just an overseas trip. That's an important part of it, but it's bigger than that. It's the start of a lifelong journey and contribution to make Australia better. We do know that many fellows say that it's a life-changing experience, and research we've undertaken shows that a Churchill Fellowship not only brings benefits to the community, but to the person that does it. It's quite transformational. A Churchill Fellowship doesn't need to comprise formal research. So you can learn new skills, you can undertake a course, you can build networks, you can observe best practice in your chosen field. And now the fellowship is for overseas travel only and must be taken between 4 to 8 weeks in one continuous journey, but there are some exceptions which I will cover off. We've awarded nearly 4,500 Churchill Fellowships since 1965, and each year we typically award around 100 across Australia. And Churchill Fellows do travel across the globe on the widest range and depth of topics and bring back to Australia information, networks, products, projects, ideas, innovations, all things to help make our country stronger. So in terms of personal eligibility, you have to be an Australian citizen or a permanent resident of Australia and aged 18 years by the application closing date, which, as Paul said, is 1 May. The ability to travel overseas is clearly important, and we can provide support if you have a disability. For example, you might have a carer that needs to accompany you, and we can accommodate that. We now also offer virtual research options for people who cannot travel due to disability or perhaps a caring responsibility that just makes it not possible to take the time to travel overseas. And as you can imagine, with the COVID pandemic, the ability to undertake fellowships where timing was very critical virtually was an amazing opportunity, even though those people didn't get to go overseas. Now, for people living in very remote parts of Australia, this year we're introducing the ability for people to undertake domestic travel, so travel within Australia, recognising that for some people in this large country of ours, there's still a lot that could be learnt by travelling within Australia due to that geographical distance. So if you think this is you, give us a call at the office and have a discussion. The Churchill Fellowship is an individual project. So we award Churchill Fellowships to individuals. So it's not a team project. It's not uncommon for us every year to get calls from project sort of research teams, and they want to apply, and we have to say, look, it's not a team thing. It's an individual thing. But keeping that in mind, we do also support, though, joint applications between Indigenous and non-Indigenous applicants on issues for their research, their Churchill Fellowship, that are primarily First Nations people's issues. So if that's you, give us a call and we can discuss how that works. But in a nutshell, what it means is that two people can apply individually and both be awarded a Churchill Fellowship on the basis that they're collaborating on their project where it relates to First Nations business. If you're undertaking tertiary studies, that's perfectly fine. However, your proposed project can't be used directly to complete your studies. So we want you to commit 100% to your Churchill Fellowship. That's what we're investing in, you and your project. And we need you to realise that on your return, there are expectations that you'll continue to pursue your project and to implement and share your findings. So it's important, though, in terms of eligibility, people from all walks of life is a phrase that gets thrown around a lot, but for us, it is our mantra. So we are looking for a diverse range of people from all different backgrounds, socioeconomic, cultural, geographic, all sorts of issues and topics and fields. I mean, tonight's session is about the food sector, and that's really important to us. I'm going to talk soon about some partnerships and sponsored fellowships we have that are very relevant to the food sector. But you can apply on literally any topic. And speaking of that, your project must be suitable for a fellowship, which means it needs to benefit the Australian community in some way. So that could be bringing back and sharing knowledge, ideas, practices, or skills. So you need to demonstrate to us that you fully explored the topic within Australia to be considered. What we don't want to do is send you overseas to research and learn skills that you could be learning here in Australia. So you need to be able to explain to us why you need to travel overseas to undertake your fellowship. The project has to be self-contained. So I mentioned you can't use it to complete a degree, but also we can't have it being partially funded by another organisation. So Churchill Fellowship is what it is, 4 to 8 weeks of overseas travel. You can't augment it into a 16-week project that's partly funded by a commercial organisation. That's not how we do it. Quite often we get asked, does your project topic have to relate to your employment? It doesn't. It typically does, simply because people will be very knowledgeable and passionate about the area that they're working in and can demonstrate that they have the ability to influence and make change in that day-to-day space that they inhabit through their work. However, you might have a passion that sits outside of your employment and you want to apply for a Churchill Fellowship on that, and that's perfectly fine. So we don't set limits on the topics or the issues, and that is the strength of a Churchill Fellowship. You do design your own project. That's the beauty of our approach. If you can think of the suitable topic, as I said, there's no limits, but it is up to you to design your project. You decide what the topic is, what you're trying to address in Australia, where you want to go, who you want to meet with, what you want to do. There's a lot of freedom in the Churchill Fellowship. I did mention that in particular in relation to the food sector, we do have what we call sponsored fellowships, and they're Churchill Fellowships that are on particular topics. For example, Colin and Maggie Beer, Colin himself is a Churchill Fellow, have established the Saskia Beer Churchill Fellowship in honour of their late daughter. And the topic of that fellowship is to support innovation in food production or farming. So we're really looking for people with applications that can fit into that category of supporting innovation in food production or farming. Similarly, we have a partnership with Hort Innovation, and they're looking for us to attract applicants in the horticulture sector to cultivate new ideas in horticulture. We have the Samuel and Eileen Glyas fellowship, which is really for Queensland applicants, and it's in relation to the tropical pastoral industry. The Jack Green Churchill Fellowship, which is for people with topics relevant to the dairy industry. And Carolyn Welsh is a Churchill Fellow who lives in Victoria, and she's sponsoring a fellowship generously to support the agriculture industry's response to climate change. So that might be a topic that is very relevant to what you're thinking about. Now, when you apply, you can select some of those particular sponsored fellowships from the list. But look, don't spend too much time worrying about that, because it won't give you an advantage or disadvantage you in any way. If you apply, you'll be considered for a Churchill Fellowship. If your topic and project topic aligns with one of these, we would allocate you to a sponsored fellowship. But it won't advantage or disadvantage you choosing a sponsored fellowship to be considered for. And if you don't tick a box and we see that your project's a great fit, we'll know that anyway. So don't spend too much time worrying about that. So you have to apply online. Applications will close at 5 p.m. on 1 May, and you apply through our website, churchillfellowships.com.au. You won't see the form there yet. That'll appear on 1 March, but there's all the information you need under the menu, Become a Fellow. You can start work on your application effectively now. And I would recommend my number one piece of advice: don't leave it to the last minute. Start planning it out right now if you're thinking about applying this year. Even that process of just thinking about it will help make your application better. So it is a competitive process, and you're competing against many other applicants. So really, front of mind should be, how are you going to convince the selectors to invest in you and your project idea? This year, we're introducing a 60-second video pitch, which effectively is you telling us a little bit more about yourself. Who you are, where you're from, what your motivation is behind your project and the issue that you want to do a fellowship on, and what the benefits are to the community that you can see from doing the fellowship. So that video is sort of integrated effectively into the application form. There's a program on our website that lets you record it. So it's all very straightforward. You can practice it and do it 100 million times until you're happy with it. Anyway, that process is new for us this year. We're pretty excited because it does give you a chance to put forward your personal story in a way that you can't necessarily do in a written application. You do need 2 references: someone who can vouch for you personally as the kind of person that can, deliver, that can talk about your passion for the issue, and then someone who is a professional reference in the sense that they are an authority in your particular topic or field or the area of your project. Second important piece of advice: engage your referees early. So, the fairly unfortunately typical story we get is it's the day that applications close and people call and say, oh, my referee is on a cruise and they haven't got a phone or internet access. What can I do? And it's like, well, turn back time, get onto them early and get them to submit it before they go away. There's not much more you can do. So really important, think about who your referees will be, ask if they're happy to do it, let them know it's coming, make sure they do their reference. That again is done through the online form by email and text message. It's quite an easy process, but you just make sure you get them lined up. Churchill Fellows have told the Trust many times that the process of writing the application is difficult because there's a character count. You've got to be succinct, you've got to be clear. Another piece of advice: don't use jargon. Try and make it as plain English as you can. The online form is fully automated. You can log in and out as often as you want, and just keep coming back to it. And only when you're ready and your reference is done can you submit it. Don't leave it to the last minute because it won't be your best application. Now, the important bit, your itinerary. So as I said, it's a bit like a choose your own adventure. You're choosing it, right? So you will need to think about, what are the countries that I need to visit? Who are the people? Who are the organizations? What do I want to do there? What am I hoping to learn? Am I going to do a course? Am I going to interview people? Am I going to observe things? What is it that you need to do? That's up to you. So limit your itinerary. Remember, it's 4 to 8 weeks. You choose how long that is. The average is usually about 6.2 weeks, I think, is the average. And it's up to you how long you think you need to go for. Don't try and put too many destinations into your itinerary, because you'll be asked the question if you get interviewed: how are you going to manage this? Why, how do you think you're going to do 16 countries in 4 weeks. It's just not going to be possible. So really focus on the ones that are the most important to you, because that will come through in your application that you've really thought about it. We won't let you travel to countries that Smart Traveller advice won't let you go to. So avoid those high risk countries where possible. But it is important that you put forward the most complete itinerary you can in your application, because not only will that be important for your assessment process, we use it to cost out your fellowship as well. What you don't need to do is you don't need to have contacted the people or the organisations and lined up those meetings, because you don't know if you're going to be successful or not. So that's not necessary, but you do need to have a really good idea of where you're going and why. So the selection process we have selection committees, and in the larger states, we have selection panels comprising volunteers from across different sectors and industries. So we're trying to make sure we've got people with good experience and knowledge of a whole range of the different topics that might be applied for. And we do break them up into categories. So might be, health and medicine, or the arts, land, commerce, logistics, whatever it is. That's really for us to help us align our expertise and our volunteers to assess. So applications are a little bit like recruitment. They're shortlisted, taking into account your referee comments, and then interviews will be held. In Victoria and New South Wales, there's 2 rounds of interviews. So you might get a first round interview and then get shortlisted for a second and final interview. So our website will detail that process, and as the dates for those interviews are set, they'll appear on the website. We have what we call a regional secretary, a staff member in each state and territory, who will keep you informed of the process and the progress of your applications. So you won't have to worry about that too much. All the interviews will be done and dusted by the end of July. Our board meets in September, and we'll sign off on all the fellowships that will be awarded this year. Something exciting this year for us is we're going to bring all the successful fellows from across Australia to Canberra for an onboarding session, and we're looking at early October, and we'll advise everyone of that as that gets locked down. So that'll be an important opportunity to not to celebrate, but to network, and we'll provide some training and things that we know will help set you up to make the most of your Churchill Fellowship. You will be able to travel this year from 1 November if you want, and you'll have 12 months from then from which to depart Australia on your journey. So we're often asked for tips on the application process, and the best tip I can give you is read and address the selection criteria. Use as little jargon as possible and be clear and succinct. So we have kind of 2 halves of the selection criteria, the project and the person. So on the project side, think about the need. What's compelling about your project? Is there a burning platform? Why is now the right time for you to be doing this? The benefits. Think specifically, how will your new knowledge or skills benefit others? Who will it benefit? Why will it benefit them? With your itinerary, I've talked about that. You've got to show a need to travel overseas, or why would we send you? Have a clear focus. And of course, you don't know what you don't know. So you might be exploring something, but be specific about what you're hoping to learn, and be clear about why you've chosen those places. And achievability is important. We need to believe that you're in a position to advance what you set out to do. Is it something that, could be beneficial in Australia? Are you the kind of person that can do that? Which leads into our second half of the criteria, the person. Why you? How can you convince us that you're the right person to undertake the project? How are you best placed to come back and implement change or influence others? An article in a professional journal sounds great, but that's not worth the sort of $30,000 or so that we'll be paying for you to go on this fellowship. You'll be expected to create some kind of quality report on your return. It could be a written report or a video or a podcast. We don't mind. You need to think about how you're going to communicate your findings and your experience. And then really, what's your plan when you come back? And this will be important if you get an interview. Have a plan for if you're successful on your fellowship journey, what will you do when you come back? We offer a lot of post-travel opportunities now. So dissemination support, there's additional funding you can apply for to help you share your findings, some leadership and networking courses. We offer impact funding now, which is effectively a grant to help people implement their findings in Australia when they come back. So just to be clear, it's not just an overseas, holiday or a junket. It's an investment in you and your passion and your energy. So it is a very competitive process, no doubt about that. Churchill Fellowships are prestigious, they're well funded, they're open doors overseas, they're open doors in Australia, but that's not a reason to be shy. If you're here, well, you're here for a reason. You're thinking about applying, and that's awesome. Don't lose your nerve, don't back out. If you're passionate about something, you see this opportunity is something that's going to make a difference for you and for your community, then put the hard yards in, put an application in. If you're not successful, that's okay. You can apply again. There's no rule against that. And some fellows do get it on their second, even their third attempt. The team here in Canberra is available for you to call and have a chat. We've got our website, we've got social media. So don't be afraid to ask more questions. So that's it from me.
Adam, thank you so much. I'm not sure whether I want to continue this information session or go and start writing my own application for a Churchill Fellowship. Hugely inspiring. And I'm sure your job involves equal parts inspiration and difficulty in discerning the people that finally get through to the fellowship. So Adam, thank you so much for that really in-depth and inspiring outline over what's involved in the application process when applying for a Winston Churchill Trust Fellowship. So that was Adam Davies, CEO of the Trust. Now I'd like to introduce a past fellow. I'd like to introduce Gina Del Santo. Gina's a cheese enthusiast and a career educator. She's the founding cheesemaker and lecturer at the Artisan Cheesemaking Academy Australia. She received the Dairy Industry Association for Manufacturing Scholarship in 2011, finalist for the VET Teacher/Trainer of the Year Award at the Australian Training Awards, and recognised for excellence and initiative in training, learner focus, and commitment to VET teacher and learning. Gina was awarded a Churchill Fellowship in 2015 to create a national centre for cheese education and to develop a paddock-to-plate artisan cheese industry. Gina, you are a very busy lady, so thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat with us today, and we'd love and look forward to hearing you share your experience on your Churchill Fellowship. Gina Del Santo, thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'll just try and share my screen now and see if I can do this correctly. It's happening. No, it's not happening. Yes, it is. Okay. Yes, we're all happy there?
Yes, good stuff, Gina. We've got it.
Thank you very much. Woo! Okay. Thank you. It's always a bit nervous to get that to work. Okay. Well, thank you very much for all the good words from everybody, and Adam, everything he said about applying for the Churchill Fellowship. Everybody must take that on board, about being passionate, about getting the right references. My project was actually international approaches to education for cheese makers and lessons for Australia. So my project was really about the education behind cheese and how to teach cheese making in Australia. There wasn't anything formal, or still isn't really anything formal for cheese making in Australia. So I decided that maybe this is what we should investigate. So even though I ate a lot of cheese and I saw a lot of cheese factories, it really was predominantly going to the universities. And just trying to, I can't change it. Sorry, guys. Okay, the application process. I was actually encouraged to apply by one of my students. He came and did my cheese making course. I do it as a Certificate 3 in food processing, but the Certificate 3 in food processing is actually very generic. So I just contextualized it to cheese. It was the best thing we could do in Australia or South Australia because there wasn't anything formally for cheesemakers. And once he had done the course, he loved it so much, he started his own factory. So if anybody's listening in from Adelaide, it's section 28 up at Woodside. And so over conversations, and he was a student, he's become one of my besties now, and we had conversations about how can we do this better? How can we do this delivery better? We knew overseas they focus more at a higher level for this sort of education. So that's where the theme sort of came for me to do the actual application. So then I had to decide where I was going to go and investigate what is maybe best practice in other countries that I can actually bring back to Australia. So I went to the States, and I went to 3 different states. I went to 2 universities and 4 producers. Went to France, and I went to 2 regions, 2 universities and 3 producers. In England, I went to 4 universities and 13 producers. And I think that was a little bit of a mistake, going back to what Adam was saying about traveling and how much you do. You know, a little lesson learnt there. Yes, it was quite a whirlwind. I did that in 5 days. So yes, it was rather hectic. And then in Italy, it was a bit simpler. I just went to 1 region, 1 universities and 6 producers. But everywhere I went, I had my questions ready, whether they're retailers, universities, like a TAFE system, a community college. I had the same questions set up for everyone so that I could actually sit back and really think about, okay, what did they need out of the industry? So I did find that in all areas I went to, it was more a degree level, and they did it more as a traineeship or an apprenticeship, really. And it took them 3 years to become a cheesemaker. So that's something we don't currently do in Australia. So it was really good just to see how that evolved, and they were always doing it that way. We never had such a thing in that side of education in Australia. So it was really, really a good lesson to learn and bring back and discuss with the dairy industry. All right, tips for organising the trip and during. Okay, careful planning. This is maybe where I didn't plan well enough, and you really need to think about this from when you're actually doing your application. This could make it hard or easy. So careful planning. Not where did I really need to go to? Why I went to so many places in England was I contacted a colleague and I said, if I win a Churchill Fellowship, could you take me to some universities? That was all I said. He said, sure, come over. Fantastic, which was great. So I got in his car and he just whirled me around everywhere, which was fantastic. But I could hardly think by the end of the day. So when I say keep a daily journal, that part of it is really, really, really important. Sometimes at night time I was so fried, I thought, oh, I won't write anything tonight. And 2 days later, 3 days later, I can't remember where I'd been. So you're looking at photos, you're looking at dates, you're contacting your colleagues. You've got to get the names right of the people you visit. Because then I did send everybody a thank you afterwards, and I wanted to make sure I captured everybody. But it was a fantastic experience. But I think you do have to think about how many people are you going to visit in a specific amount of time. One of my biggest highlights was actually meeting Charles Martel. He's actually has a cheese business, he's a cheesemaker, and he developed the Stinking Bishop, which is quite a strong cheese, as it suggests. It's a wash rind, and he also makes a double Gloucester and cheddars and red Leicesters. But as it turned out, I didn't know this until I got there. He knew I was coming and that I was a Churchill Fellow, but I just thought he was a cheese producer. So when I got there, I found out that he actually did awarded a fellowship in 1965. Now, it wasn't in dairy, but it was just so wonderful to meet and chat to somebody that had been a fellow 50 years before, and it's inaugural year, 50 years later, we get together. So we were sitting around his kitchen table, sipping on pear brandy, talking cheese. It was really such a wonderful experience. And it's just hard to explain how the good feeling you get from something like that. And every other person I've met now that are fellows, it really is like a family. And the experiences you share, places you went to, friendships you still continue to have, it really is delightful. Expectations when we got back, of course, we've mentioned the report of some form. So you do know you have to do it. So you have to always have that in the back of your mind while you're traveling, taking your notes, that when you come back, you do need to do your report. Also promoting the Churchill Fellowship. I found that I did that by doing talks at dairy conferences. So I went to Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Tasmania, and Adelaide, and it was an absolute pleasure to stand up and talk about the Churchill Fellowship and what I achieved, and what information I brought back. Now, since I've been back, I've been able to sort of work on what my discoveries were, which is high level education at a university level. So it was a bit much of a jump to go from a certificate 3 to a degree. So I have worked with Skills Impact, and we've got a diploma that reads Diploma of Artisan Cheese. We're not implementing it at the moment, but I'm still working towards that. So I have achieved what I wanted to. I brought back the knowledge, I shared the knowledge, and now it really is something I'm passionate about and sort of would like to keep working towards. So that's sort of, for me, best practice education. I've seen it overseas and I've brought it back to Australia. So for me, I personally feel like I achieved what I had set out to do. But again, it's about that application, organising where you need to go. I made one little mistake. I was going to go to Portland, Oregon, and I ended up changing it to St. Louis Obispo because it was just easier for me to get to, but my learning outcomes were the same. Again, in the planning, that was just my little mistake, talking to the agent, then I wasn't sure how I was going to get there. It was a lot further than I thought. I didn't want to drive in the States. So you have to think about how you're going to get from A to B. Is it going to be public transport? You're willing to drive by yourself? Are there many flights? It's a lot to sort of consider when you start doing the actual application. Apart from that, I think I'm finished with my little chat. I do talk a little bit quickly. Again, all I can say is I've always been grateful to the Winston Churchill Trust. I love to pass it forward, and that's what I'm doing today, and happy to answer any questions at any other time.
Thank you so much, Gina. Very inspiring. It's you are definitely struck me as someone who likes to fit a lot in to their life, Gina. That was I find it hard to believe it's possible to visit that many universities and places and talk to that many people in such an incredible time. You must have come back incredibly inspired from that journey.
It was fantastic. Like I said, a lot of people to meet in a short time, but very grateful. And everyone just spent a lot of time with me. It really was a wonderful experience.
And Gina, do you think you would have had the opportunities to develop your understanding and your knowledge and your business within Australia had you not undertaken something like the Churchill Fellowship?
No, I don't believe so. I think seeing how, and every university delivered a little bit differently, but their models were fantastic because it was a teaching institute, but they also produced for the university. So products were sold. And having it at a high level and doing it at a very scientific level, I just feel as if that's really where I'd like to see us go, where we've got a big institute that we're teaching the cheese making, but we're also producing, and I produce and sell here, but on such a small scale. It was just wonderful to see. I loved it in every country, and they were just so open-armed. It was beautiful.
And Gina, if you had one piece of advice to any aspiring applicant for a Churchill Fellowship, what would that be?
Just maybe don't do too many trips in 5 days.
Let it breathe a bit.
Let it breathe a bit. But again, I have to still say, do your notes and be meticulous with your notes. It makes your life easy when you get back and do your reports.
Because I can imagine you're so caught up in the thrill of the travel and meeting all these exciting and inspiring people that you think you're definitely going to remember it. And then you get back.
No, you don't. And sometimes at
one.
night time, there's no downtime because some people are that generous. I've met with them during the day, but they say, let me take you to dinner tonight.
Of course.
So that's it.
If I have to.
Yeah, if I have to, I'll go and drink champagne. But then you don't put that half an hour aside to do your report, right? Go, I'll do it tomorrow night. And you do forget, you're too busy, you're jet lagged. But it was a wonderful experience.
Well, Gina, thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience with us. Very inspiring stuff, and you're a great ambassador for the trust and the fellowship. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
No worries. If there's any questions for Gina, feel free to pop them into the Q&A function down. You'll see that on the bottom icon menu of your Zoom browser there, or any questions in general. We'll come to them shortly. We're also going to launch a quick poll to see where everyone's joining us from. It's just going to come up there. If you wouldn't mind just popping in the state that you'd be joining us from, so we can get an idea of where people are joining from all over Australia. So if you just take 2 seconds to fill that out, that would be greatly appreciated. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our next speaker and fellow, Cameron Matthews. Now, Cameron is passionate about creating a blueprint for the food service industry to improve sustainability across key areas, including sourcing, society, environment, and chefs' mental health. He has held the role of executive chef for a range of iconic restaurants, including Brisbane's Siggy's restaurant and Lurleen's Syrah Winery, Mount Cotton. In November 2020, Cameron followed his dream and opened his own restaurant, Winston, a chef in residency pop-up held within the iconic Wasabi restaurant space in Noosa. And in late 2021, he opened newly established Hazelwood Estates, the Paddock restaurant. Cameron was awarded a Churchill Fellowship in 2016 to research and develop improved sustainability practices for high-end restaurants and food outlets. Cameron, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us. Pleasure.
Now, Cameron, was the name Winston, was that a nod to your experience with the Churchill Fellowship, or was that just a coincidence?
Oh, definitely. It permeates your soul, I think, once you become a fellow. You can't not. So Winston, as a pop-up, was there for 5 months, and it was the culmination of all my experiences over 30 years, not just through fellowship, but really trying to make something different and create something unique. And I loved it. I nearly bought the sign along today and just put it up beside me. I've still got the sign that we had one of the favourite positions.
Well, Cameron, if you want to jump into your presentation, we're all yours.
Fantastic. We'll see if we can get this going.
The moment of truth.
Moment of truth. I think I managed it. That's pretty good. For a local cook, I mean, yeah, it's nice to have another cook on here as well, Paul. I'd have to say it's nice. So as you said, my fellowship was based around sustainability in high-end restaurants, and I went away looking for, I guess, a blueprint to find out what we could do better as an industry and to be able to make industry-wide changes. 2017, 2018, a lot of high-end places were closing on from the high-end kind of side of restaurants. A lot of the really good places were actually closing, and looking at it, there's so many people burning out, and everything was changing. I think my fellowship has probably become even more and more prevalent with COVID and the changes that have happened over I guess the last 2 or 3 years with that all happening. So going away. I was lucky enough to I went to the US, to Copenhagen. I went to the UK, and I spent some time in France. Reason why I chose these restaurants, my fellowship was a little bit different. I like to do things a bit differently. I didn't necessarily go away to talk to specific people and have meetings all over the place. I actually went and staged, so worked for free in these restaurants. Looking at it from the ground up, really wanted to go away and see why these places and the restaurants that I went to had all won most sustainable restaurant in the world through San Pellegrino, one of the top 100 restaurant lists. So these places are all one of the most sustainable restaurant. And my thing was, well, okay, why are those the most sustainable restaurants in the world? So as you can see there, went to the USA, went to Chez Panisse, the home of Alice Waters, the godmother of farmers markets in San Francisco. An amazing experience. Blue Hill at Stone Barns over in Connecticut, north of New York. A chef by the name of Dan Barber there. One of my food gods, and was so I guess like a little kid in a candy store, to be honest, to spend time in the kitchen at Blue Hill. And then I flew over to Copenhagen, had an absolutely terrible time at Restaurant Raleigh, to be honest. I'll get to that later. And a Mass restaurant, which has always been one of the leaders, I guess, when it comes to sustainability through restaurants. And then through all that, got introduced to the Jamie Oliver Foundation through a good friend of mine here in Australia, and then went over there and spent some time with the foundation. And then I'd also done a lot of work with Oz Harvest, so Ronnie Khan's Oz Harvest, and they hooked me up through UK Harvest. And then I was supposed to go to Spain, and that all fell through, and I ended up going to this restaurant Septime in France. I think that's a good point too. Is as much as you want to do things and you want to sort of set up your fellowship the way you want it, it might not work out that way. I really found through mine that things just changed, and you just roll with the punches kind of as you're going through. It's just the way that it works. So for me, the highlights of my fellowship here, excuse me, putting my own face in the photos then. At Chez Panisse, it was my second night that I'd been away, and I was standing beside another young fellow, and I didn't get his name. It's probably one of my biggest regrets from my whole fellowship. But we're standing there. He was studying psychology at Berkeley University, and we're actually potting broad beans, and we were talking about what I was away for and about my fellowship. And he said to me, chefs and cognitive dissonance are go hand in hand. And at the time, I didn't know anything about cognitive dissonance. The way he described it to me was doctors who smoke, people who know they shouldn't do something and yet they still do. That then, at the end of my my fellowship, I wrote a page basically on, it's called The Chicken, the Chef and Cognitive Dissonance. And a lot of chefs run around looking for the most sustainable produce and the most free range, the best chicken. He's lived on AstroTurf and eaten gold-plated chicken feed and drank Evian his whole life. And yet, as chefs ourselves and people within hospitality, we spend a lot of time in four walls under fake lighting, generally not eating or drinking very well. And it didn't make any sense to me through a simple conversation. It really stood out to me as something that we did badly as an industry, was not look after ourselves well enough. So I actually went away looking at sustainability. When I come back, my report's actually folded under mental well-being rather than sustainability, which I think is kind of cool. And my whole fellowship has changed and metamorphosized into something else. Restaurant Rally, I'm calling them out. I know a few guys who have worked there now, and it hasn't happened to everybody, but my experience at Restaurant Rally was horrendous, absolutely horrible. I won't go into the details, but it was terrible. I only lasted 2 days. I was supposed to be there for 2 weeks, and I lasted 2 days. It taught me so much, and is now the basis for most of my beliefs when it comes to my Churchill Fellowship, that it was the best experience at the same time. It opened up my eyes to a lot of things. They'd been the most sustainable restaurant in the world for 3 years in a row, and the way that I was treated wasn't sustainable at all, and it was actually quite horrible. But it turned me around from looking at sustainability into chef's mental health. So, that was a big change for me. I got to go to Dan Barber's Wasted at the top of Selfridges in London. So Wasted was essentially a pop-up restaurant, all based on waste, or food that wasn't destined for restaurants anymore. So a lot of people think of waste as stuff that needs to go to a rubbish bin. It's certainly not that. It was amazing, and I actually got to spend the day in the kitchen there through a friend as well. Wasn't planned, just popped up along the way, and I had time, so I got to go in. Also down the bottom there, traveling around, meeting some of your heroes and some not of your heroes. I got to have about 3 days of conversation with Dan Barber, one of the leading figures, I guess, when it comes to talking about sustainability in restaurants. Jamie Oliver, spent some time with him, got to cruise around on his boat. I know it's pretty cool. It was a good time. That was through UK Harvest. And at the event there, we can see me up on the big screen. Got to do an event called UK Harvest, where we cooked for underprivileged people. I was invited while I was over there to do this. There's 25 of the UK's best chefs, some of my food gods, cooking alongside them. Guys like Jamie Oliver, Brett Graham, amazing chef. For those people, anyway, I won't go into the chefs, but amazing people. And Camilla, the Queen's Consort, now Queen's Consort, was the patron of that event. So she came around and had a chat. I spoke to her for about 15 minutes, which I thought was pretty cool. I had no idea who she was at the time, and I had to ask 3 times as to who she actually was, but before I found out who she was. But anyway, these are the amazing people you meet when you're out and traveling around. The picture down the bottom there, through Jamie Oliver Foundation and UK Harvest, I was invited to go down and cook with. They're all actually fresh out of jail, so they've only been out of jail for less than 3 months. And we used a whole heap of food that had been destined for waste, and we cooked a dinner for 60 people, which was another highlight. It was amazing down at Chichester. The impact for me, and I kind of listening to Adam's introduction, and I was sort of sat here nodding, and my head nearly fell off, because the fellowship certainly changed my way of life and my way of thinking. I think it permeates into my being now. It challenges me every day to think outside the box. I really look at everything that I do and put it through the filter of my report. For me, it's given my career a purpose. You know, I'm 30 years or 31 years. I know I don't look that old, but 31 years of cooking in high-end kitchens. And you know, I was going away to food events and doing all this presenting on stage and talking about food to a lot of people. And it was just about food. It was a little bit hollow. And food is my life. I absolutely love it. But to actually be able to now have a purpose behind it, it's given me a renewed, I guess, lease of life when it comes to being around food. And like I said, this is all based around restaurants, probably more so than food production, but I think it all still stands true. Just actually joined forces with it's called the Falls Farm. Bit of a shameless plug there. They just won through Delicious Produce Awards, the most regenerative farm in Australia. So we've taken on Mapleton Public House, which is an old pub, and we're going to create hopefully a best standard of what a hospitality business should look like in Australia this day and age. So trying to take all of the old school things that we used to do, throw them out the window, look at them differently, writing different rosters, having people work on farms, having no hierarchy, having no egos, all these different things, which have all come from my fellowship. For me, the best takeaways from my fellowship is giving me permission to talk about change. A lot of people beforehand sort of said, yeah, but yeah, who are you? Kind of a little bit. It's kind of given a weight, and a weight is probably the best thing to it. It's also changed my view on what sustainability and what a sustainable restaurant looks like. Obviously, being filed under mental health now with my report, it starts with that. So I don't look at sustainability of the industry anymore. I look at the mental health of the people within our industry, and especially after COVID, it's become more and more important for us to do that. There's so many people that still love food but don't want to be in the industry anymore because it's burnt them out, and you know, they're really feeling it. I'm the conviction to be a change leader. It just burns so bright. I can't. That's a whole nother webinar. I have to do this now. I've always been determined to be a good cook, to be a good chef, to be a great dad. But now the conviction to be a change leader in our industry is almost undescribable. As far as the fellowship itself goes, you know, you'll make amazing contacts, and it's the small conversations that you have that you don't realize that you're having that are the most amazing thing. I've made some lifelong friends through my fellowship, and still do. You'll meet these amazing people. As Gina said, you know, meet someone that you've always wanted to meet, and all of a sudden it turns out that they're a fellowship. I think it's the type of passion that people exude. Whilst we're talking about food production, I think hospitality needs more fellows. So if there's anybody watching that's within the hospitality sector, please apply. We need to make change, and we need to make it now. And to be a Churchill Fellow can certainly help springboard that change. Where he sort of mentioned the hospitality thing there. For me, the best advice I'd give to fellows is, you know, apply with conviction and believe you can make a difference. That's so important. I think passion. When I did my interview, I didn't necessarily have a plan in place, but I promised that I would make a difference. If they sent me away, I would come back and I would make a difference, and they did. That weighs quite heavy on me now, in a good way, not a bad way, and I have to make a difference because I promised that, and they've given me the responsibility to do that. I think that's probably my bottom point there, understanding the implications, because you become a fellow for life. And once you go away and you've done the work, and you've been away, and you know, the dust is all settled, it's there, and it's going to change. It's going to change your world. So apply for it. For me, as a simple cook, the report coming back was quite daunting. I've never really written anything like that. You know, it's not something that I was comfortable with, but I actually wrote 2 reports. I wrote my first report because I jumped online and I looked at all these amazing reports written by surgeons and lawyers and all these amazing people that are really quite, I guess, academic. And I looked at it and I thought, I've got to make it like this. And I wrote probably about half my report, and I read it and I thought, I don't really understand what I'm trying to say here. I was trying to be too wordy with it. So I wrote it in my words, and my report, I think it stands out because it's really quite simple. It's just honest and to the truth, to the point. So I don't think you need to worry about that. And if there's any concerns, you know, around that, don't be concerned. don't be concerned about what your actual fellowship looks like. It'll metamorphosize and do its own thing. They have a life of their own. The most important thing, I think, is to work out what you're actually passionate about, and then apply with conviction, and believe that you can make a difference, because being a Churchill Fellow will certainly put you on that path to actually be able to make a difference. And that about wraps me up.
Cameron Matthews, thank you so much. If people aren't feeling inspired to apply by now, then I think they might be in the wrong place. Mate, you can absolutely sense the passion and inspiration in everything you do there. So thanks so much for that presentation. And Cam, do you think that when people go on a fellowship, we go over to learn cultural practices in foreign countries and bring them back to Australia, but do you think that then, given the kind of abundance of cultural ability within Australia, that we then have an opportunity to become world leaders?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's half the point. We do things really well here in Australia, but to go away, and you can always cherry pick those little things from places that do it really well. Every place you go, the cultural differences, like you say, are so different. And there's all those things you can pull from that. There's so much to learn, right? And it's an ongoing thing. We should be a world leader. We should be. Our food and the production of our food is second to none. Our farmers are amazing. I have problems with certain shows that are about chefs that should be called master producer, not the other one. Things like that. Purely because what we do as a country is absolutely amazing, and we need to show, I guess, the world that that's what it's about.
And did you find that, kind of building on that a little bit more, that as a part of the fellowship you go to learn, but were you also there as an ambassador and advocate for what's happening here in Australia?
Yeah, look, I think for me, because I was older, so going into the kitchens that I went into, and like I said during my presentation, my fellowship was different. A lot of people go and see a specific person, have a specific set of questions they want to ask. I went in and worked. So I was one of the boys in a kitchen, and I'm sure you will appreciate this. You go in as a stagiaire, and I was 46 or something, I think, when I went. You're working with 17, 18-year-olds that know it all, and they're all that kind of, they're working in 2- and 3-star Michelin restaurants. So for me, it was about showing that I could do it, for one. I think that was a big thing. But then also talking to them and having them realize that there's actually people out there doing different things, still wanting to cook amazing food, but to make changes, because the places that I went to, they were sustainable restaurants, but everyone was still working 90 or 100 hours a week. My fellowship, I went away looking at sustainability in high-end restaurants and mental health, and ended up working for like 3 weeks with pneumonia, because that's what I do to myself. I was looking at mental health. I was looking at sustainability in restaurants and how we can do it better. And I knew I had pneumonia, but I still kept going. I was working from 7 a.m. in the morning through till 2 a.m. That was what I did at Blue Hill to fit it all in. I don't suggest you do that. Like, it's silly and it's crazy. That's the mentality that I had. And now Churchill. So my fellowship has taught me that I'm not a chef. I'm Cameron Matthews, and I happen to cook. And that's a big difference, and that's a really resounding difference. And I think that as that ambassador kind of role that you kind of said when you were away, I shared that with a few of the other guys in different kitchens, and we still talk about it to this day, is the fact that they've sort of said, yeah, you know what, I want to be me. I want to be me, and I'm a cook, but I don't want to be a cook and kill myself and die as a cook, which is kind of the way that they're kind of going. So yeah, pretty heavy kind of stuff at times, but to go away and to represent and to go, yeah, I'm here from Australia and we're going to make change and we're going to do it really well was amazing.
Well, Cam, it's a great yarn and very inspiring. You've inspired Dan on the Q&A section in there as well. He's got a question there for you, interested in connecting. So if you want to jump on there and maybe swap details with Dan, if that's something you'd be open to, right, I think that would be greatly appreciated. Cameron Matthews, thank you so much for your time.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
No, pleasure. Now comes the time where we can throw it open to you, the dear viewer today that's been patiently sitting there and hopefully getting a great deal of inspiration. So now, to wrap up this session, I can invite you to throw your questions to our speakers, whether it be Gina or whether it be Cameron or whether it be Adam. If you've got any questions, now is the time to put them forward. And so all our speakers, if you could turn your camera back on. So Cameron, Gina, and Adam, we get those all back on. And if there's any questions, people can pop them into the Q&A there. Dan asked, Gina, where are you going in Portland? That's where I'm from.
I did see that. I was trying to quickly think where was going to go. It was a university there, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. I can only remember the name of the person, sorry, but I was a little bit regretful I didn't go.
Thank you, Gina, and thank you, Dan. Nat asks, I'm interested in the great work done in terms of creating a course upon return. What was this part of the application or something that was added after you returned? Gina, I assume that's in reference to you.
I think so. So can you just read that question again? Or
Nat wondered, she was interested in the great work you've done in terms of creating a course after you returned from your fellowship. Was that a part of your application, or is that something after you added after you returned?
All right. So the application really was centered around what are dairy or cheese making courses around the world. How do they best run them? Because we don't have one in Australia. So all we have to do is contextualize something. So I did the writing after, because that's what I could see was the best learnings, was a school that ran as a university or a college that was focused around dairy or cheese making, and the title of the course, the title of the degree or whatever literally was cheese making. Whereas we don't have that in Australia, but we can have it up on Scope now, and it's called the Diploma of Artisan Cheese, and I did that on my return.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the question, Nat, and thank you for your answer, Gina. Mandy's asked a question saying, applied last year and unfortunately was unsuccessful. Adam, I assume this one would be directed to you. Is there any way that they can get feedback on the application, or is it just a matter of applying again?
Look, it's a bit of both. So we don't tend to do individual feedback. And if you look in the answered question, someone else asked a similar question, and I've posted up a link to some sort of generic feedback. We keep adding to that every year. So you have a look at that and sort of read those questions and answers and think, is that something I should change in my application? But what I would say, and because we really do want people applying in this theme of food production and innovation, have a look on our website at other fellows, and you'll find every Churchill Fellow has a profile page. You can read their report, but importantly, there's also a contact form. So you could reach out to fellows and connect with them. I haven't met a Churchill Fellow yet who wouldn't want to have a chat with you about your idea. So you could get in touch and we'll connect you. Tell them what your project is, tell them a bit about what you're thinking, get that feedback from them. They've been through it, they've been successful. That will really be a great help. We also have alumni associations in each state and territory. Same again, if you look on our website, there's a map of Australia down the bottom. You can connect with the people in your state, go and have a cup of coffee with them or something, and they can help give you some tips as well. So hopefully that's going to be useful if you do that.
Thank you, Adam, for that response. I've got another question here from Jarathan. I hope I said your name right. Is it better to go broad with the topic/project to allow flexibility and add focus later, or better to have a rather specific area? Or sorry, I just moved as another question came through. Let me just start that again. Is it better to go broad with the topic or project to allow flexibility and add focus later, or better to have a rather specific area but risk being too niche?
Look, I think, again, I attend all the interviews every year, and I think if you're too broad, you run the risk of not looking like you're really sharp and focused on what you want. So successful applicants are kind of like have laser sharp focus on what it is they want to do. They're like, I want to go overseas. I want to meet with these people, and this is why. Let me tell you, in Australia, we're not doing it like this. I think we could do it differently. Like, really be clear on what it is. If you're too vague, there's going to be too many people that are focused on what they want, and they'll just be stronger than you. So I think that the risk is being too vague.
I've got an anonymous question here saying, I'm interested in investigating the basis for a business back in Australia. It would be a field outside of my normal profession. Is that too ambitious?
Oh, that's a question for you, I think. The person who asked the question. I think, is it too ambitious? That's probably going to come down to, can you convince the selectors that you're actually going to be able to achieve this? So I'd be looking for, have you got a reference or a referee, or do both your referees say, yep, Paul's going to do this, like I've seen him in action. He's going to come back. He's done this before, this kind of thing. Like he's got it. Or I'm, as a referee, I'm also a business mentor, and I've got his back. He's got the support. Do you have that kind of story behind you? In which case, doesn't sound too ambitious. But if it looks like a pretty big lick your finger and stick it in the air, then that might make it look a bit too ambitious.
That commenter went further to say, I have a concept, but haven't started research here in ambition of applying in a future year. How accomplished and how much research are you looking at? Do I need to undertake formal studies to back myself as an applicant?
Look, it depends on what it is, but I would almost always say you don't have to undertake formal studies, but that depends on what your project is. If your project is in something really technical where you're going to expect someone as a qualified chemist or something, then that might be something to think about. But I think you almost answered your question in a way, like you haven't started research. So yeah, in future years, smart thinking, it might be maybe 2 or 3 years before you apply, but at least you're focusing now. And I think that really you just need to show some runs on the board.
I've got a couple of comments here for Cam. One was, where is your local cheesemaker? I think that might have moved on there. Someone obviously filed that away, but
Good old walk-by cheese.
Great, you got that one. Sweet, thanks, Cam. And Louise Tran has also commented down the bottom there. More a comment rather than a question, but a big thanks to Cameron for sharing his experience. I'm from Oz Harvest, and it was amazing to hear you speak about the impact this program has had on your life and the ongoing positive contribution you continue to make in the industry. So nice bit of kudos there for you, Cam. And if anyone's got any further questions, that looks like it might be about it in terms of our questions. So I'll take the opportunity to wrap up this session because we've just gone over the hour mark. So thank you to all of our speakers, to Adam, to Cameron, to Gina for sharing your insights, your inspiration, and for giving people a little bit of an inside track about how to get the most out of their Churchill Fellowship application. No doubt you're all feeling hugely inspired by this evening's workshop, and you're already probably feverishly taking notes and getting ready to get your application in. There's more of these workshops and information centres being hosted throughout February. If you want to learn more, you can visit the Churchill Trust website for more dates and details. This and other information sessions will be made available online later on. So remember, those application windows open in March and close in May. Thank you again for attending, everybody, and enjoy your evening. Thanks so much, everybody. It's been a real pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you all.